Hi, and welcome to Feature Fridays. My name is Guy Bartram, Director of Product Marketing at VMware, and I'm joined today by Romain. So welcome, Romain, again. Do you want to just introduce yourself to everyone who hasn't seen you before?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the invitation. My name is Romain Decker. I'm a staff technical product manager in the CIBG, so in the Cloud Infrastructure Business Group at VMware, and I cover there everything networking for our cloud providers.
And we're here to talk about networking today. So thank you, Romain, for taking the time out today to join us. So the big kind of subject that we're going to discuss today is the NSX-V to T migration tool, 1.3.1, which came out on the 1st of December. Is that right?
I don't remember if it was 1st of December. It was last Tuesday. So yeah, it was it was actually the last day of November.
Okay, all right, good.
Official date.
So tell me, what is this new iteration of 1.3.1 all about? Let's perhaps start, actually, let's rewind a little bit and just do a bit of a recap. Tell us about the assessment tool and why is the assessment tool necessary?
Yeah, so this is actually the 6th already version of the NSX migration for VMware Cloud Director. And I will just share quickly a slide about that explains again what the tool is and why it's important for our cloud providers. So in a nutshell, the VMware NSX migration for VMware Cloud Director, that's, I know, a long product name, but it's for trademarks. It's a CLI-based automation tool. It initiates and migrates an NSX for vSphere organization virtual data center in VCD into an NSX-T or VDC. So it's a replication of topology followed by a live migration of the workloads. And it's the only solution that exists to migrate an NSX-V environment if you're running VCD with a limited downtime. And with the spring release that we had 1.2.1, we introduced something called the assessment mode. And it's not like a self-assessment like you can see with other tools. It's actually reading the topology of NSX and VCD from a VCD point of view, and it provides summary reports about the features that could block potentially you for an automated migration. And it really helped us to define the future of the migration tool because we actually understood after receiving the first assessment reports how cloud providers are really consuming VCD and not what we just expected from just conversation that we had with them.
So the tool that we're talking about is actually it's a product, right? It's a CLI product, like you say, and this assessment mode is critical for us to be able to help cloud providers automate more on their migration journey. It's not saying you can't migrate from, if there is a blocker, it's not necessarily saying you can't migrate. It's just that you might have to do some steps manually until the tool catches up.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And indeed, the NSX migration tool it's a CLI based because we decided to dedicate the complete development effort to actual features being migrated and not to have a UI, a fancy UI. I know some would prefer a UI to do that, but it's actually quite easy to use it. You just have a binary and a YAML file that is used to describe how the migration is supposed to look like.
Right.
And it's indeed an official VMware product. And because of that, you have GSS support. So you can open a ticket because you have an error in your migration or if you need help.
Got it. That makes sense.
And to complete on the assessment, it's automatic. It just needs VCD 10.x. So we support like 10.0, 1, 2, and 3, and all minor versions. Unfortunately, we wanted to support it for 9 and the 8 branches, but the API is too much different to actually for us to actually being able to read correctly the topology. But still, with 10.x and above, we support like 3 years of VCD versions right now.
Yeah.
So, and it provides it's just doing read only. You just need to log to the API endpoint of VCD, and it's just parsing and looping for all NSX-V organization VDC. And it's providing two reports in CSV format. The first one is a summary report. It's GDPR compliant. It's completely anonymized. And it's really in one page, a glance of what could potentially block you. So we have items that are listed as can be mitigated. Things that can be as easy as MTV apps. We don't support live migrations of MTV apps, so just delete those MTV apps and so on. And for all those items, the mitigation steps are described in the documentation. And then we still have a few other items that are currently blocking potentially an automatic migration today, at least for the org VDCs that are concerned. So for example, the next version will support routed vApp networks. So in Q1 next year. And after that, you will be able to migrate all VDCs that have routed vApp networks. And we took those assessments and we asked since May to send the assessment reports to that email alias. And so read them carefully. And we actually compiled all the assessment reports that we received to deviate and to really shape the roadmap of both the NSX migration tool and on which features we should focus on for the next versions, but also to influence the roadmap of the NSX-T integration in VMware Cloud Director. And we have data about on hundreds of thousands of workloads. So it's really helping us to define the future of the roadmap.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. So obviously, VCD used to be purely NSX-V and VCD. Now it's obviously NSX-V and NSX-T, while NSX-V transitions. But not everything. I mean, we've been battling with what NSX-T needed to support to make up for NSX-V functionality. We've also been battling with getting new NSX-T functionality integrated into VCD whilst managing this transition. So it's like three things going on at once.
Yeah. Indeed, it's a lot of moving parts, and the nature itself of VCD is ambiguous because you provide that self-service capabilities to final customers. So even providers, most of the time, they don't know exactly if it's not a managed service, what tenants have configured in their virtual data centers. They don't know if they configured NAT or load balancing and so on. So they could go and look by connecting to the tenant portal, but it's not very friendly to do it, especially if you have a large infrastructure and hundreds of tenants, potentially thousands of org VDCs. Here it's completely automated and it's really fast. It's taking less than a minute per organization VDC, and it's really robust.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the assessment tool. So the summary here is to keep on doing the assessment tool, and if you haven't done it, these results are helping us prioritize and will make your migration easier. And 1.3.1, which is the new version of the migration tool, is building in more functionality to cover those gaps that we've seen. Yeah,
exactly. So before switching to the what's new, to conclude on the assessment, in the previous release of the NSX migration tool, the 1.3 that we released in August, we added the support of shared networks. When we looked at the first assessment reports that we received in May and April, we actually discovered that shared networks were really more widely used as we expected and as we knew. And the 1.3 version unblocked a total of 24% of the total workloads that were blocked for the migration because we didn't support migration of shared network before. So really, that's how we use the data that we receive that is, again, anonymized.
Yeah.
So we continue to use that data to build on the future of the NSX migration tool. So the 1.3.1 release that is now a week old, we added a support for several different things. I will start by the right. Enhanced network pool support is actually before 1.3.1, the 1.3.1 version, we only supported VLAN or VXLAN network pools. But we also had providers or customers that were using DVPG-backed network pool, so port group-backed network pool. Also, that had organization VDC with no network pool, or that had a network pool backed by multiple virtual distributed switches, and so on. Mm-hmm. So from the assessment reports, we know that these new features on the right unblock 9% of the total workloads that we know about. So that's a huge improvement.
Yeah.
Migration to a different vCenter. So until 1.3, the NSX migration tool is expecting to migrate to an NSX-T vSphere cluster, but that is managed by the same vCenter server.
Yeah.
With 1.3.1, if you have for a hardware refresh, or if you are changing solution, I don't know, maybe VCF or VCF on VxRail, you need to have that new vCenter that is managed by the SDDC manager and a different SSO domain. So that's now fully supported. We still need to migrate within the same VMware Cloud Director instance because it's a migration done from a VCD point of view. But now you can have a destination NSX-T clusters that are managed by a different vCenter server.
Okay. And I guess any idea on how many service providers have that configuration? Because I would imagine that's quite a common use case for service providers to build out a new NSX-T solution and a new vCenter environment.
Yeah, it's we don't have exact numbers on that because it's a new vCenter implies that it's something that may not even be there yet. And
of course,
by experience,
of course, yeah.
by experience, it's between political and almost a religious belief, depending on the administrators. So you have, when I was a final customer, or when I worked for system integrators, you have two schools. You build from scratch, or you update and update and update again. And at some point, some people just want to build from scratch to have like a fresh new environment,
yeah,
and just migrate the workload. So you have two schools, and when I say religious beliefs, it's almost true because some people are really attached to one of the methods and others to the other methods. But I've talked to a lot of providers that want to have a different vCenter for the migration.
Yeah, I get your. So the analogy of that is upgrading your OS on your laptop, or your desktop. Do you start with a fresh OS and restore the data, or do you? Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes a clean install is a good thing.
And then we also added support for DHCP relay and DHCP static binding. So those were added. The support for NSX-T backtalk VDC was added in VCD 10.3.1. So we also added the support for the migration. And finally, route advertisement enhancements. So this is for fully routed network topologies. So when you have a dedicated T0 or dedicated VRF, and where the tenant can advertise and choose to advertise specific CIDR blocks, we only had the first half of the migration done in previous versions. So it was replicating BGP neighbors and IS numbers and other things, but we were just missing the advertisement piece in the migration tool before 1.3. So that's done now. So it's fully supported now to migrate routed topologies.
Okay.
And we also did, you notice the and more. If you want to see everything, there is a blog post that I wrote and published last Tuesday or last Wednesday, the 1st of December or 2nd of December. And you also have the release notes that details everything, including the bug fixes and so on. For example, we added support for certificate-based IPsec VPN or new digest algorithm supported. For example, those small enhancements unblock 3% of the total workloads that we know are using those features or those specific configuration. And 3% may not seem a big number, but if you stack this upon like hundreds of thousands of workloads or potentially millions of workloads, I mean, it's still a big number.
Yeah, totally. So Romain, well, there's one more thing obviously to talk about, which is the updated assessment mode. But just before we get into that, what now, in your view, is the kind of priority on this migration? How long have service providers got left, and how many more instances do you think there will be of this tool before time runs out? And will there be more?
So the official date for the NSX-V end of support or end of general support is January 16th. And I remember that because it's the wedding anniversary of my parents. So I usually remember the day. So no, there will not be further extensions. So, but it doesn't mean also that NSX-V will stop working after that date. So our customers and providers have different options. By default, if you don't do anything, you will get one additional year of technical guidance, like with almost all our VMware products, where you can still open support tickets to some extent, but we won't be able to provide any hot fixes or hot patches if there is any bug or security issue. You can also purchase a support extension for a year that will replace technical guidance. And yeah, after January 2023, it will be finished. But again, it doesn't mean that NSX-V will stop working. So if you haven't started to plan the migration or to even migrate, I think now is a good time. I know it's December and it's usually like production freeze and change freeze and so on, but at least planning, testing NSX-T, testing the NSX migration tool, assess your environments if you haven't done it. It's really helpful, even if you don't share the reports with us. Really assess, you have a detailed view as well that explains you which all VDCs have which challenges. It's really helping you to prepare. And finally, remember that the migration itself is granular. So you do the migration by all VDCs or by pack of all VDCs. So it's not done in one time. So you may have like, I don't know, 50% of all VDCs of the total workloads that could be already migrating now. And until you migrate those, the next version will be there, and we will add support for more features like routed vApp networks is coming in Q1. We also will have other improvements that I can't really talk or discuss right now, but the routed vApp networks is one that is blocking, we know, 10% of the total number of workloads. So that will also be added in a few months. Well, in a few weeks now.
Yep.
And yeah, if you haven't really started, please start. It's not too late. It's never too late. And it's granular, so you can start with all VDCs that are not blocked right now.
Yeah, and I'll make sure that all of the links to the blogs and the microsites and everything else are in this Feature Friday. But you know, if a admin is not quite sure how to start, then the assessment actually is the place to start, right? So let's work out what is your potential for more moving, like I said, groups of org VDCs or per org VDC. There's rollback for each one, if I remember rightly. So if there is a challenge, it is automatically rolled back. You know, it's a pretty safe migration mechanism by the looks of it.
Yes, exactly. We built the migration tool around 5 design principles. It's completely automated, so it does everything for you, including the creation of layer 2 bridging automatically for you from VLAN or VXLAN into Geneva. And it's completely automated from a DCD point of view. So it does topology application, it copies policies, metadata, the networks, the edges, all the services associated with the edges, and so on and so on. And it's granular. So that's the unit of the migration is the org VDC. You can migrate up to 16 org VDC in a single migration phase. So, but it's still granular. And it's non-destructive, which means that at the end, if you're not happy with the result, you can automatically roll back.
Yeah.
The 5th design principle is that we made the tool robust and safe. So it does have a pre-check that will prevent any migration if it detects an unsupported topology, an unsupported feature, or something that is not healthy. If for any reason you have I don't know, a power outage or something, you can just resume the migration. You just relaunch the CLI, and it's just resuming happily from where it stopped.
Okay.
Automated rollback. You have an error, you just relaunch the CLI and you do -- rollback, and it's just rewinding all the steps so that you're back in your initial state. And we also introduced breakpoints for those who want better control of the actual steps in the migration. So now you can either skip specific workflows or execute only or run only specific ones, which is also helpful.
Yeah, definitely. So these are great principles to have, and this is going to be a lot easier than doing it yourself without this tool. What's the feedback? I'm curious. What's the feedback been from providers who have used the tool for migration?
It's hard to say. We received a lot of great feedback because some providers actually discovered quite late that there is a tool that will help us to migrate. We also have some mitigated feedback because, well, it's a migration, and obviously a migration is never like something that you can that you are happy with. And I've done migration in the past, and I mean, it's just, for me, it's regular maintenance work. So at some point it has to be done, but it's something that, well, you have to take care about. Also, I have seen several providers that because they don't know, they just don't start to think about the migration. So yes, as you mentioned, the assessment is really the place to start if you're running VCD. It doesn't require any kind of knowledge. It's just a binary download. You have to provide the FQDN of VCD and provide username, password, and that's it. It doesn't touch VCD configuration. It runs really fast, and you have a good idea, a big glance of where you stand for the migration.
And is there any, once the migration has happened, is there any post-checking that the tool does, or is there any advice on how a provider should check the orgs are running with the new networking configuration on T?
No, we don't have like a post-migration check. We just expect more like the operation teams from the providers or even the tenants to validate that all their workloads are happily running. But no, we don't have any final checks. You have like a quick summary of what the tool has done. And there is always that intermediate step where the tool exits. So after the migration, after the workload migration, you are in a temporary state, and the tool exits, and it leaves you the opportunity to validate that everything is working as expected. And so that's you are actually in that step. And if you are, before you do the cleanup, if you don't do the cleanup, you will have both source and destination environment still running at the same time. If you do the cleanup, it will destroy the source environment. But until you specifically ask to finalize the migration or the transition, it will not touch the source environment. So that's also like something to help to do additional checks for the migration.
Yeah, that's a great point. So before you hit the cleanup should be the absolute end of the maintenance window.
Yes.
Perhaps after the maintenance window, because it's non-disruptive to the new configuration. But yeah, definitely work with your tenants to understand, what their applications are doing, and define a criteria checklist of the networking that's required to support those applications, and that it's up and running and reachable.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
Okay. So is there anything else about the new tool that we should know for this session, Romain?
No. Again, those are the new features. Updated assessment mode. We haven't talked about it, but because we support additional features with every new versions, well, we have to update the assessment mode to reflect what's supported in that specific version. So if you run the assessment mode before, you can just rerun it with the new version, and you will see that things disappear from blocking items or from the can be mitigated items. And then the other features that we talked about.
So with with VCD versions bringing in more NSX-T functionality as we go, if someone's looking at this now, obviously they've got an NSX-V environment. Hopefully they've stood up an NSX-T environment. They're ready to do migration, perhaps on a separate vCenter, perhaps on the same. If they're on VCD 10.1, for example, and not the latest, will they then, would the advice be to upgrade VCD to take advantage of those new features as well? So the migration tool then really knows that actually I'm migrating to the latest and greatest in NSX-T and VCD.
Yes, so there are two ways of seeing that. The first one is that the NSX migration for VCD tool as a product, it has a life cycle, and we do Q&A. And so we also have an interop matrix. So if you go to interop.vmware.com, you just search for VMware NSX migration for VCD, and you will have the versions that the tool can interop with and versions that are like fully supported. Those are the versions that we officially tested. And so that's one, if you want to stay in the, we said it in English, in the swim lines about what's supported or not. And some features that we migrate, we actually have hard-coded checks in the migration tool to validate that you are in a certain VCD version, because we rely on new APIs from VCD that are introduced with each VCD releases. And we rely on those new APIs to actually be able to provide those new features. If you take the example of the migration to a different vCenter server, that requires VCD 10.3.1, because the API to do that successfully between two different vCenters on all type of storage is only available since 10.3.1. And almost most of the features that we add support for have like a dependency on the VCD version. The HCP relay, the HCP static binding, those were things that didn't existed before VCD 10.3.1.
Okay, so and I guess that's the assessment tool is going to tell you that?
Not really, because the assessment tool, you can run the assessment mode from any 10.x version. It just expects to be able to read the 10.x branch API and more. I don't remember which. It's 30. I think it's 29 or 30 and above API version.
Yeah.
And that's it. But it doesn't. It cannot extrapolate on which VCD version you need to correct each blocking item. For some, it will be quite simple because, for example, if you just have had an issue with DVPG backed network pools, that's now supported since 10.3.0 and not 10.3.1, and so on and so on. So some of the features that you want to migrate are related to older versions of VCD, and some of the new features that we have require the latest and greatest, as you said.
Okay, so that's another kind of level of checking that perhaps the admin should do first, is make sure that the features you need for NSX for the migration are supported in 10.3, or sorry, in whatever version of VCD it might be. Okay, and that should probably be your pre-step, right? To upgrade VCD first to that environment, and then look at the NSX-V to T migration. Sorry, you're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, indeed. Well, upgrade just before the migration. You don't have to upgrade VCD for the assessment, but before the migration, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, great. Well, that certainly solved a lot of questions in my head. And Romain, thank you very much for running through 131. Like I said, I'll make sure all links are in the description of the video, so people can read more about it. Anything final to add, Romain, before we close?
No, nothing except like re-emphasizing that you should start migrating if you haven't.
Yeah, exactly. And there are other routes as well to reach out for support and questions, like the Slack channel, for example. I think have you got an email address as well, apart from the assessment address?
No, the assessment. I'm reading the assessment alias, so I can answer to that also.
Okay.
And indeed, the Slack channel, the Slack workspace, you will have the link, but it's cloud providers.
I'll post it in the description. Yeah. Okay. The Slack channel is brilliant. If people need not necessarily support, but just have a question. If you want support, obviously raise a GSS ticket. But if you've got a question about something, you pretty much got follow the Southern coverage with our Slack channel, because our engineers are global, which is quite cool. And obviously you can then talk to other colleagues in the same situations, perhaps, and relay information. And obviously we're monitoring it, so we can obviously take feedback as well through that channel. Romain, thank you very much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Sure. Happy to join anytime.